Hello there, coming to you live from the capital Jakarta, Indonesia. We are coming with a special program here on TVR Our World, the 43rd ASEAN Summit and its related summits taking place here in the capital. I'm Rahmat Idris.
And I'm Luisa Kusnandar, and today we are with you live and we will bring you plenty of updated news from the 43rd ASEAN Summit as well as a live dialogue later on with Jose Rizal Damuri from the Executive Director of CSIS.
That's right. Luisa, this is day two of the summit. Yesterday, we've had such a plethora of dynamics at the first day of the summit. It was opened by President Joko Widodo. Plenty of strong statements delivered by our presidents. One of them is that ASEAN will not be, or rather rejects to be a proxy for any powers in the world, when we should all be standing on equal footings. And on second half of the day, the much-awaited AOP Forum, or ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum, also took place, which means that we are tightening cooperations between some notable member countries of ASEAN and all the countries within the region. So that's something to look forward on day two, because right now taking place at Jakarta Convention Center is the 26th ASEAN China Summit, where President Joko Widodo had just opened the program, Luisa, and just moments ago, also the remarks on behalf of Xi Jinping was delivered by Premier Li Qiang. In the meantime, let's just open up the program. This is our special program of the 43rd ASEAN Summit and its related summits.
So let's start our show today of the opening ceremony of the 43rd ASEAN Summit. This is day two, and we will invite up here to our stage Bapak Jose Rizal Damuri as the Executive Director of CSIS.
Right. We're always very happy to have our colleague from Center for Strategic and International Studies. We look forward to hearing his insights. Mr. Jose, a very good morning. Jakarta time to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, shall we take our seats then?
Okay.
Right. Luisa and Mr. Jose, this is day two, as mentioned by Luisa earlier, meaning that day one has concluded with so many things to unpack because, as I said earlier, our president started the day with some very notable and strong remarks on behalf of ASEAN.
Yeah.
I believe on behalf of CSIS, Mr. Jose, you also paid close attention to what's transpired yesterday. Can you give us your biggest takeaways from day one of the ASEAN Summit yesterday?
This ASEAN Summit, as always, bring a lot of a big agenda. And then I think yesterday, President's remark on the opening also mentioned several crucial things that ASEAN face at the moment. Like, for example, President Jokowi explicitly mentions that ASEAN is not an area to project power. And it is a kind of like recognitions of what's going on, the dynamics that happenings in the regions. And perhaps we also note that it would bring a very big impact, significant impact to the regions. Presidents even mentions about explicitly about the concerns of many people, many observers in these regions, and also in other regions about the unity of ASEAN. And I think ASEANs also need to think about it, need to be more serious about it, because it's not only about the existentiality of ASEAN, the existence of ASEAN, but also about the stability and the prosperity in these regions. Without ASEAN, without the unity of ASEAN, there would no longer be a prosperous regions that we are always envisioning at the moment.
Pak Jose, you mentioned about reunity of the ASEAN, and this is something that President Jokowi has emphasized. Why do you think our president emphasized on this? Are we not united enough so far?
No. I think what President Jokowi also mentions in his remark, actually, it's not that ASEAN might have different opinion, different perspective, or even different interests with each other among ASEAN countries. But what it needs to have is more dialogue and then a greater understanding to each other. I think unity in diversity, as we have in Indonesia here.
Bhinneka Tunggal Ika.
Yeah, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika also means a lot for ASEAN. But I believe we also need to acknowledge that the current political dynamics in these regions brings potentials of divisiveness into these regions. Yeah. ASEAN's unity may also need to be taken more seriously and then discussed seriously so that it won't happen in the future.
Right. One of the first things that our president mentioned yesterday for the opening of the summit, Mr. Yose, was the fact that he acknowledged and he shared the pride of ASEAN among all of the members right now. However, he also began with a very heartwarming expressions of, I welcome my family to the table of the summit, meaning that we're all together in this. ASEAN centrality still matters. Yeah. We are united. Even though I guess he was saying unity does not mean conformity. Yeah. We may have differing opinions on things, but we are all standing on equal footing, hopefully, on some of the most crucial matters of ASEAN. Yeah. What I'm trying to ask your opinion of, Mr. Yose, is the fact that he also mentioned that ASEAN does not want to be, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, proxy of any powers in the world, because you know that the centrality of ASEAN has attracted so many different powers. A lot of countries out there from different continents are wanting to be partners to ASEAN. So how do we read into this statement of our president, Mr. Yose? Well,
it's always the strategy of ASEAN to balance its positions among major powers. Major global powers, world powers. And so far, I think for the last 30 or even 40 years, ASEAN managed to do it very successfully. Yeah, but the recent political dynamic might also change the situations because there is a big force, a very powerful forces that ASEAN countries need to respond. And I don't think the old mechanisms or the old approach still suitable for responding to the current situation.
You're saying ASEAN needs to reform, Mr. Yose?
That's one of the things. Yeah, as an institution, ASEAN needs to reform. How far is the reforms? We need to look at it again. But I believe ASEAN's also already started to do some kind of reform. Whether it would be enough, would be sufficient to respond to that kind of political dynamic, then we still need to see it. But I think what ASEAN tried to do, try to reforms the institutions, also should be appreciated. But one thing that we need to look at, other than just responding to the global power, actually what happens inside the ASEAN. We also need to acknowledge that ASEAN is the internal ASEAN itself.
We have big regional homeworks, you're saying.
Big regional homework, and this big regional homework is also threatening the unity of ASEAN. Such as, for example, the problem in Myanmar issues.
That's the elephant in the room.
That's right. So, besides trying to respond to the external shocks that we are going to have, we also need to take care of what happens inside of the ASEAN.
Mr. Rioso, you seem very passionate when you talk about reformation of the ASEAN countries. Could you please explain to us in what aspects are we in dire need of reformation?
Well, depends on what kind of situation or what area that we need to look at. Yeah, but I believe ASEAN already started to have this kind of dialogue. They have the high-level panel on trying to look at the institutional aspect of ASEAN. Like, for example, ASEAN is really in a dire need to strengthen the secretariat of ASEAN, for example.
Which is based in Jakarta here.
Yeah, which is based in Jakarta, because it provides a lot of functions that might not be only at the secretariat function. It also has a potential to be able to provide more substantive recommendations to the leaders, and that's one thing. Another thing is also about the consensus basis. Maybe ASEAN also need to review it against, or at least to reevaluate whether this kind of consensus-based decisions really need to be put for the whole elements, for the whole agenda of ASEAN, but or perhaps can be also extended to many other models, many other approach.
Can you please shed a light, Mr. Yose, on the irrelevance of consensus-based decision-making within the body of ASEAN to the times that we are in right now, that it needs to be reformed as well?
Well, it's not really irrelevant. It's still relevant for sure, because it's a consensus-based decision is one of the I think the best options. But I think ASEAN should also open to other kind of approach in making in the decision making or rules making, because like, for example, in economy, in economic areas, the so-called ASEAN minus X has been applied for quite a while, more than 20 years, and it's already provide a lot of benefit to the process of ASEAN, especially in the economic integrations. So that kind of things perhaps also can be used, can be implemented to other areas of cooperations in the region, especially because if we look at the three pillars of cooperation in ASEAN: economic, social, cultural, and then political and security. We seen that political and security remains to be underdeveloped.
Even though political insecurity is actually the basis of the foundation of ASEAN when it was formed in 1967.
That's right.
56 years ago.
Yeah.
But it still lacks, as you're saying.
It's still underdeveloped, and I think consensus based perhaps can be relaxed to several of the ASEAN agenda on that issue. So that we can really properly respond to the current situation, because the current situation is basically about the political and security situations, and we need to be more active in that aspect as well.
All right, so there you go.
In the meantime, Louisa, yesterday, as we mentioned, was such a highlight. All eyes were on Jakarta, basically, just to see how the first day of the summit transpired. I believe, Louisa, you have the report on how it went yesterday.
That's right, Idris. President Joko Widodo officially opened the 43rd ASEAN Summit held at the Jakarta Convention Center in Senayan, Jakarta on Tuesday. The Indonesian president highlights a difference is one of the key aspects that can further strengthen the unity in the ASEAN community.
President Joko Widodo and First Lady Iriana Joko Widodo greeted leaders from other ASEAN members upon their arrival in Jakarta Convention Center. In his address in the opening ceremony on Tuesday morning, President Joko Widodo said that the difference in opinion in ASEAN can, in fact, promote the democracy within the regional grouping.
Yang Mulia, pada momentum yang baik ini, sebagai anggota keluarga dan sebagai Ketua ASEAN, saya ingin menegaskan bahwa kesatuan ASEAN sampai dengan saat ini masih terpelihara dengan baik. Kesatuan jangan diartikan tidak ada perbedaan pendapat. Sebagai negara yang memiliki beragam suku, budaya, bahasa, dan agama, bagi Indonesia, kesatuan itu adalah sebuah harmoni dalam perbedaan, termasuk di dalamnya perbedaan pendapat. Karena perbedaan pendapat justru menyuburkan demokrasi, justru menunjukkan bahwa kita sebagai keluarga memiliki kedudukan yang setara. Kesetaraan ini yang saya lihat sudah menjadi barang langka di dunia. Banyak ketidakadilan dan konflik terjadi akibat tidak adanya kesetaraan. Tapi di ASEAN berbeda. Kesetaraan justru menjadi value utama yang kita hormati dan kita junjung bersama dalam bingkai persatuan dan kebersamaan sehingga kapal besar ASEAN dapat terus melaju.
In addition to ASEAN member countries, Indonesia has also invited the President of Bangladesh, Mohammed Shahabuddin, as chairman of the Indian Ocean Rim Association, or IORA, and Prime Minister of Cook Islands, Mark Brown, as chairman of the Pacific Islands Forum.
In the meantime, on the sidelines of the summit, President of Indonesia Joko Widodo has conducted bilateral meetings with a number of countries' prime ministers who have been arriving in Jakarta for the 43rd ASEAN Summit this week and starting September 3rd.
On September 4th, President Joko Widodo had a bilateral meeting with the Cook Islands Prime Minister Mark Brown as the chairman of the Pacific Islands Forum, or PIF. The president also held bilateral meetings with 3 other countries, Vietnam, Leste Timur, and Cambodia. In a bilateral meeting with Vietnam's Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, Jokowi discussed the maritime cooperation and sustainable fisheries. Whereas with the Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, Sanana Gusmao, President Jokowi discussed the settlement of the land boundary and invite the government of Timor-Leste to establish an economic zone at the border of the 2 countries. Meanwhile, with the Prime Minister of Cambodia, Hun Manet, the president discussed the protection of immigrant workers and also cooperation between state-owned enterprises of the 2 countries.
Now, speaking from the ASEAN Summit, President Joko Widodo called on Southeast Asian leaders to become bolder, more agile, and devise a long-term tactical plan to address the growing global challenges. Let's have a look.
Speaking at the start of the plenary session of the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta on Tuesday, President Jokowi said ASEAN needs a long-term tactical strategy which is relevant and in line with people's expectations. The president explained ASEAN, as part of the Indo-Pacific region, consistently works hard to take an inclusive approach to advancing the economy and development so that it can have a real impact on the people and the world. Likening ASEAN to a large ship, Jokowi said it has a major responsibility towards the hundreds of millions of people who are sailing together on it. He added, despite having to sail through a storm, ASEAN leaders must ensure that the ship can continue to sail, and we have to be captains of our own ship to achieve peace, to achieve stability, and to achieve prosperity together. President Jokowi also said ASEAN member states are currently discussing the drafting of the 4th ASEAN Concord to formulate a strategy for the association until 2045.
All right, so Mr. Yose, as you watched just now,
Yeah.
do you agree that, as what our president said, that the leaders, the Southeast Asian leaders, needs to be more bolder,
Yeah.
more agile?
I agree 100% with what President says, that ASEAN leaders need to be bolder. That's because there are so many challenges in the front of us. We already discussed about the geopolitical dynamics in the global context, but also in the regions. But we also have internal situations, internal problems under ASEAN, and also we have many other issues that we need to take care more carefully, but also require bolder actions, such as, for example, the climate change. This is really serious problems. We also already feel the impact of it, and it threatens our existence at the planetary level. And so I think ASEAN leaders and ASEAN need to be bolder on trying to prevent that kind of things, or to mitigate the impact of this kind of challenge. Then we also have the new technology progress that is progressing very rapidly,
Speeding up, yes.
speeding up, and we didn't even know what kind of technology would appear within several months or several years ahead, and then we need to respond to it. We need to look at it in a good way, because of course the technology offers a lot of benefit for us, but it also brings the dark side. And we also already feel feel the impact of this dark side of the technology. So we need ASEAN leaders need to offer some kind of efficient, but also take a bolder step towards the better governance of this technology.
All right, and also, of course, making faster decisions, especially when it comes to technology, as you mentioned there, Yose. All right. So besides that, of course, one of the challenges that ASEAN is facing now is economic. The global economic condition is predicted by the World Bank will only be able to grow by 1.7%. That's for 2023. And also, there's the high inflation rate of 10.3% at the end of 2022. Mr. Yose, in your opinion, how should ASEAN respond to such conditions?
Yes, we are quite lucky, perhaps, because we do have a strong recovery during the last 2 years after the pandemic. Then ASEAN's also recorded quite good performance, but this performance seems to be fading out. A strong performance seems to be fading out, and then we're going to need to deal with the challenges ahead. We still need to deal with the fact that some economic engines, some world economic engines that normally also bring the ASEAN prosperity, is no longer working well. The U.S. economy, for example, is still pretty much under pressure. And now we also look at the possibility of China's economy.
The decline of the GDP of China has been making news this summer.
Yeah, China's economy and Chinese market, and it would affect the economy of ASEAN. So what ASEAN needs to do, I think we need to do, we also need to strengthen our own market, our own economy. And by doing that, we need to have continued reforms in each ASEAN countries. But we also need to strengthen the cooperations. And this is not easy because it's really beautifully can be beautifully crafted on paper, but difficult to implement the economic cooperations in the regions. And another things we also need to look at in the global context, and then still try to be more active in the global economic order. Because the global economic order, the multilateral orders, is currently under threat as well, especially because of the geopolitical issues that is happening at the moment.
Right.
Mr. Yose, sorry, you mentioned just now that we need to strengthen cooperation. In what aspects are we talking about for the strengthening cooperation? Is it in trade investment or energy or transportation? And what priority would that be?
There are many actually that we can do. I think if we look at ASEAN agenda, it's full of kind of sectoral basis or sectoral cooperations that we have to pursue. ASEAN, for example, has just launched the negotiations on digital economic framework agreement, DIFA. It's going to define the digital economic landscape in these regions, but also beyond. And it would be pretty much significant. On trade, ASEAN's also started the discussions about the renewed of the ETIGA, the ASEAN Trade Agreement, and ASEAN also has quite a progress. Has some progress on the discussions about the movement of persons, movement of labor, because some ASEAN countries already have difficulties in their demography, while others still have a demographic bonus. So we need to strengthen these agreements on labor movement.
And plagued by transnational crimes on that sector too.
That's right. That's right.
Illegal migrant workers crossing around ASEAN and just bringing headaches to our leaders.
So the agreements would be very crucial, not only in supporting the economy, but also in preventing all kind of human rights violations.
Mr. Yose, you mentioned there briefly on what we've achieved just a day, or rather 2 days prior to the main summit here in Jakarta, was that the signing of the start of negotiations for the DEFA, the Digital Economy Framework Agreements across ASEAN, which we believe will be a game changer for the region. Mr. Yose, in your opinions, what sort of challenges that we need to anticipate? Because negotiating is something of a different it's a beast of its own. We've seen all of these sort of negotiations on, preceded meetings of ASEAN, which ultimately end up in deadlock. So, what sort of things we should anticipate for the DEFA negotiations, and how do we find common currency for the region?
I think one thing is for sure, ASEAN countries need to have same spirit and motivations. I believe that the spirit and motivations with regard to the digital economy is that we need to foster the innovations. This is one thing that we have to encourage. The innovations would become the key aspect for the future of economy, and these regions really need that. Especially on the digital economy. Another things, the motivations that they have to agree first is that despite the progress or the benefit that that the technology has brought, we also need to acknowledge that it requires governance. It requires regulations, but the regulations need to balance between the innovations and the protections of people, protections of the society. So how to find the balance, especially when we're talking at the regional level, cross-border, cross-border mechanism
within the bloc.
Yeah, because each country already has this governance governance aspect. However, the governance aspect might be different from one another. And when we're talking about the digital economy, we're talking about cross-border or
payments,
without borderless transaction, borderless activities. So we really need to have this kind of regional governance on the digital economy. I think this, if ASEAN countries has this in mind and as a motivation to find the balance between protecting and supporting economy and protecting the society and the need for having more harmonized regulatory frameworks in the digital economy, I believe that negotiations would proceed quite well.
Well, digital economy is the future. It's inevitable and we are heading there. But it's just a matter of, can we catch up? Can the government catch up to anticipate whatever the dark side that you mentioned beforehand?
Yeah, of course. Well, the governments normally always late on it. But I think that's what makes the more flexible regulatory framework is needed, because in order it would allow you to be more flexible and to be more agile in responding to what happens, what is going on. Otherwise, if you have a very restrictive regulatory framework, then you cannot do much when something new happens.
That's right.
So it's the matter of adapting to what the current situation, current time is demanding. Mr. Yose.
Adaptability and agility.
If you can predict what the digital economy in the future going to be 10 years from now, 15 years from now, how is it going to be like, Mr. Yose?
That's right, because
I'm curious.
I'd like to piggyback on what Luisa said. We have the ASEAN Vision 20 years from now, 2045, Mr. Yose. Can we see as digital economy across the region as a strong platform by the time we reach that vision?
Well, it's very difficult to predict.
Oh, it's very difficult.
Very difficult, especially with this technological progress. In 2019, CSIS invited what they called the most intelligent robot at that time to Indonesia, the Sophia, the most intelligent robot. It was very impressive at that time. So we could talk with her. We could talk. We could discuss. She even could make some
very
kind
knowledgeable.
of jokes. Some kind of jokes. But now with ChatGPT, Sophia seems to be pretty dumb. It was just only 3 years, and then things already changed a lot.
Exactly.
Imagine if ChatGPT or AI per se is incorporated within Sophia. We have the eloquentness of a person,
the brain, and also the brain.
That would be a scary future.
And it's pretty scary to think about.
That's right. That's right. So very scary, but we cannot escape from that. And then we also need to embrace it, because it offers a lot of opportunity to the economy, not only to the economy but also to the development, more inclusive and more sustainable development. What we need to do is trying to be more adaptive and agile in dealing with that.
Flexible.
More flexible.
However, Mr. Jose, in terms of monetary transaction, how is it going to be like in the future? Or perhaps in the near future?
Yeah, that's what ASEAN is also trying to do at the moment. So one of the agenda is about the cross-border digital payment. I believe this is going to be a really big game changer in providing and facilitating a transaction that might also be helpful for the small or even micro and small enterprises.
Yes.
For business and most importantly for travelers,
Yeah, for travelers.
across Asia. And from what we've heard, Mr. Yose, we can pay with the QR code already in Malaysia.
In Malaysia
and
at the moment.
and
Thailand.
And Thailand too. So that's good news. Hopefully other nations or ASEAN member states will follow suit as well.
Yeah, and it would also help and support the micro one.
Yes.
Because you no longer need to exchange your
SMSEs.
Especially the micro and small.
Micro and small enterprises. We'll have to take a short break now, Louisa and also Mr. Yose. We have more exciting dialogue coming in and hopefully live pictures from Jakarta Convention Center on day 2 of the summit. Stay with us right here on TVRI World. Have some water.
You are watching the 43rd ASEAN Summit here from TVRI World. It's our special dialogue.
Yep.
And with us, we have Mr. Yose Rizal Damuri, the Executive Director of CSIS. And now we're also joined by Professor Alexius Jemadu, Professor of International Politics at University of Pelita Harapan. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Was there a traffic problem because of the ASEAN Summit just now?
I guess all of us experienced that this very morning. We're at the center of the action.
Yes,
Louisa.
exactly. Now, Professor Jemadu, this is day 2 of the ASEAN Summit. Could you please share with us what is your expectation? What is the expectation from this ongoing summit, especially from the internal relations point of view, discussing about the prolonged dispute of the South China Sea at the moment?
Yeah, my expectation is that, ASEAN countries now are in the situation where they expect much from this summit for their economic recovery. But then in order to have stable economic development, you need also regional security. Yeah? You need also a guarantee that the rivalry between all these great powers is not going to disturb the smooth process of this economic recovery. As you see that economic and security are closely related. So we need this economic recovery to go smooth. And then in order to be able to do that, we also need regional security, and all the stakeholders should participate in guaranteeing that the regional stability is there, and together with ASEAN partners, we need to, to guarantee this regional stability and security.
Right. Well, on that note, Professor, ongoing as we speak right now, behind closed doors, is the meeting, the 26th meeting of ASEAN plus China. Do you think that the issues and the elevated tensions in South China Sea is going to be on the table for the two partners to decide, to talk about?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very relevant, and that is the situation where we are now. But I don't think that ASEAN and Indonesia as a host, they are going to mention this explicitly, in order not to, to create not very comfortable situation for all parties. But even if they talk about it, they will say things in very general way, very normative, in order to make sure that all parties feel comfortable with that. But it doesn't mean that ASEAN is not concerned with that. But the way they communicate their concern, I don't think that it is going to be confrontative, but more in a friendly way, in very general terms, in very normative way, without naming, without blaming any party, in order to keep the situation conducive for everyone.
Right. And as we speak right now, we are also giving you pictures just moments ago on our screen of the starting point of the 26th ASEAN plus China meeting. And a lot of eyes also on this meeting, Professor, I must say, because just recently, if not a couple of weeks ago, China released a new map, which is basically enlarging the domination of China on South China Sea. And this map has been hotly contested by countries that have also claimed parts of the oceans, such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Brunei Darussalam, and even Malaysia. So it makes it even more of a prominent issue on the table, which should have been front and center. And as you say, maybe all leaders will pivot around it rather than just hit into the hot button issue to discuss.
Yeah, I think collectively, I'm not sure that ASEAN is going to raise the issue as explicit as they
the
would say.
Because that's what we've been waiting for.
You know, the standard policy of ASEAN relating to this issue is that they say things in a very general way. For instance, you have to respect international law. You have to resolve the problem in a peaceful way instead of using military approach. And they also stick to the idea that the talks on code of conduct should be continued. And those are the things that I believe that they are going to raise this time, but not to criticize China openly or even to say explicitly about that map. The new map. It is not going to be very explicit on that issue, I believe.
Right. And now, Louisa, and let's take a look or have listened to the opening remarks of President Jokowi on the 26th ASEAN-China Summit.
Selanjutnya, saya mengundang Yang Mulia Premier Li Qiang, Perdana Menteri RRT untuk menyampaikan pidato pembukaannya. Saya persilahkan.
尊敬的佐科总统，各位同事，很高兴和大家相聚在雅加达。感谢佐科总统和印尼政府为会议所做的精心准备和周到安排，也欢迎东盟观察员东帝汶夏娜娜总理与会。我也期待与各位新老朋友。
And I look forward to in-depth exchanges with friends both old and new. In 2013, it was also in Indonesia that President Xi Jinping proposed building a closer China-ASEAN community with a shared future. Over the past 10 years, China and ASEAN have forged ahead hand in hand and contributed to each other's successes. Facing great changes unseen in a century, we have embarked on a right path, featuring long-standing good neighborliness and shared progress and prosperity. China has remained the world's second biggest economy, and ASEAN's combined GDP has become the fifth largest in the world. Our joint efforts are fully reflected in the following 4 areas. First, we have been committed to treating each other with sincerity, and our political mutual trust has grown deeper. Sincerity is the key that opens the heart, and trust is the bridge that connects the minds. No matter how the international situation evolves, China and ASEAN have maintained close exchanges and communication, respected each other's development path, and accommodated each other's major concerns. China was the very first country to establish a strategic partnership with ASEAN and took the lead to elevate the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2021. And that is a strong testament to the strategic trust between our two sides. Now China has reached important consensus separately with 6 ASEAN countries on building a community with a shared future, and we hope to do so with more countries in the future. Second, we have been committed to mutual assistance, and our good neighborly friendship has become stronger. China and ASEAN countries enjoy geographical proximity and close affinity. We have adhered to the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence and the purpose of the TAC. We seek common ground while setting aside differences, properly handle disagreements through dialogue and consultation, and consistently deepen practical cooperation in the traditional and non-traditional security fields. We have preserved peace and tranquility in East Asia in a world fraught with turbulence and change. In particular, we confronted the COVID-19 challenge by coming to each other's aid in those difficult times, and that is a reflection of our brotherly ties in face of adversity with concrete actions. Third, we are committed to mutual benefit, and our will and cooperation has been more productive. China and ASEAN see each other's development as an important opportunities, and we have kept markets open to each other. Last year, our two-way trade volume reached over $970 billion, and that is more than doubling the volume a decade ago. We have been each other's top trading partners for 3 years running. In 2021, at the special summit to commemorate the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN dialogue relations, President Xi Jinping pledged that China will buy up to $150 billion worth of agricultural products from ASEAN in the next 5 years. Now, to date, over $55 billion worth of these products have been imported, faster than expected. We have reached the full consensus on regional connectivity, delivered a steady stream of signature outcomes in high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, and made solid progress in building the new international land-sea trade corridor. All this has brought new opportunities for both sides. Fourth, we have been committed to coordination and inclusiveness, and our common development has become more sustainable. Both Chinese and Southeast Asian cultures value harmony between man and nature. Following the philosophy of green, low carbon, and sustainable development, we have fostered new cooperation highlights in climate action, environmental protection, energy transition, and poverty reduction. The China-ASEAN Year of Sustainable Development Cooperation was held in the past 2 consecutive years. China's Global Development Initiative, the GDI, and the ASEAN Community Vision 2025 echo and reinforce each other, and the GDI has been widely recognized and welcomed by ASEAN countries. The China-ASEAN cooperation has come a long way, and the key reason is that we both have a keen understanding about hardships. We both have a relentless pursuit of peace. We both have a strong aspiration for development, and we both take real actions to preserve regional stability. As long as we keep to the right path, no matter what storm may come, China-ASEAN cooperation will be as firm as ever and press ahead against all odds. And we each will achieve greater development and progress in the course of such cooperation. So those are my opening remarks. Thank you.
Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
Selanjutnya sebelum kita mulai sesi pleno, yang akan dilakukan secara tertutup. Dengan hormat saya mohon awak media untuk meninggalkan ruang pertemuan. Terima kasih.
We just watched a live relay just now of the 26th ASEAN-China Summit. So, Mr. Jose Rizal, what's your take on that so far? We heard a lot of comments about sincerity and trust to bridge bridging connects the mind, also mutual assistance and peaceful coexistence.
Well, yes, China has always been one of the major partner for ASEAN, and China also already contribute a lot to the ASEAN economic development, for example. But I believe as we also already discussed about this South China Sea, it reduced the trust between ASEAN countries, at least several ASEAN countries, to China. And it might also affect the relations between those ASEAN countries and China. I agree with Alexius before that it's not really a good platform, a suitable platform to discuss about South China Sea at the moment. But I hope it would also be touched in the discussions between ASEAN and China, at least to give political support. This is a very good chance to give political support for the ongoing process. We know that in July, ASEAN and China agreed to accelerate. They call it accelerate the discussions about code of conduct in the South China Sea, and it would be, if this code of conduct already can be agreed upon, and this is a really good way to increase the trust between ASEAN and China. And the current current meeting can provide a good political support in order to move on to accelerate this process.
Right. You mentioned that there is indeed progress towards the negotiations, the discussions to produce the so-called code of conduct. However, it goes without saying, Mr. Jose, that we have to abide by the 1982 UNCLOS, which is China also one of the signatories, and from what we learned, has ratified the UNCLOS 1982. But however, they still go by the 9-line map, which was produced long time ago during the time of the emperor, and now with the new map more dominating the regions. How do you think the discussions on the table of code of conduct will proceed in a way that will be in favor of the pertinent countries involved in it?
Yeah, I think there should be two or several parallel mechanisms. In one way, the code of conduct just trying to provide guidelines for kind of conduct that you can do or you cannot do in that regions. But on the territorial basis, you also need to still to pursue, although it's even a bit more difficult to do, to proceed. And in my opinions, perhaps we can focus first on the more practical issues, trying to get this kind of code of conduct, so that the stability that we also already mentioned several times can still be maintained in these regions, because it's going to be needed for more prosperous and more and for the developments in this region.
Right. The prosperity and stability, or in the way of our minister put it, peace and stability in the region.
Stability.
Peace and stability.
Well, of course, this is such a sensitive matter, but let's see how it rolls out for the next couple of days. Professor Jemadu, if we can go to you. When opening the 43rd ASEAN Summit, President Jokowi has already said that the association has agreed not to become a proxy for any power. How can such condition help some country members in addressing the maritime and territorial disputes with China?
Yeah, I think it is a good statement on the part of this combination of small and middle powers to say that clearly in order to defend their dignity in the eyes of these great powers. But the situation in the field is not that simple because you see that these countries, 10 countries, members of ASEAN, they also compete to win the favor of these great powers, especially economic facilities provided by these great powers. And the great powers are also aware of the importance of these economic instruments in order to exercise their influence on these small and middle powers. So the situation is quite complicated, not easy to say this or say that. Yeah, but what we would expect that China would also understand the concern of these countries. Yeah. In order to to demonstrate its seriousness in building mutual trust. Yeah, the more you have stakes in your economic engagement, the more trust you need in order to maintain that. So China, I think, also needs to understand the emotions and the feelings of these countries in order to explain things to their people. Because there is a lot of pressure, that ASEAN should say in a more assertive way, their interests. But I think our leaders have the wisdom how to navigate these relations in such a way that all their strategic interests are fulfilled.
Right. Professor, we were entertained a couple of weeks ago with the report saying that Xi Jinping might actually make it to ASEAN summit here in Jakarta, but not to the G20 summit in Delhi.
Yeah.
But then it turned out that they go by the old traditions of China's participations at ASEAN summit, which is always attended by the premier. And that's what we are looking at right now.
Right.
Xi Jinping is not here. Instead, Premier Li Qiang is here on his behalf. How do you think it may or assert different influences on behalf of China with the presence of the president or the premier?
Yeah, you see that my understanding of the situation is that China does not give priority to ASEAN.
Okay.
You can hear from the statement of the Prime Minister, economic cooperation is very important. ASEAN is a great trade partner
to China.
To China. Yeah. So you see that the presence of Prime Minister Li Qiang here is also important. It doesn't reduce.
It doesn't undermine China's commitment to ASEAN.
Commitment to ASEAN, knowing that the trade is on the rise and investment is also runs very well, and there is you see that one of the statements made by the Prime Minister that China and ASEAN determine each other's success in economic prosperity. That's a good point, and they try to maintain that and try to make sure that it will grow even higher, for this economic cooperation.
Just very quickly, on that note, Professor, I'd like to go over to Mr. Yosid. Something that piqued my interest was that when you say that the economic dependence of ASEAN to China, because it was also mentioned that by the Premier that China and ASEAN have elevated their status from strategic partnership to comprehensive strategic partnerships. And the Premier also mentioned the booming, or rather the elevated number of the GDI, the Global Development Index from China. Do you think that the elevation of this partnership status will also go in line with the GDI from China within the ASEAN bloc?
Well, it's not only ASEAN's dependence to China, I must say. It's also the Chinese dependence to ASEAN.
To ASEAN.
So it is a mutual interdependency, and I believe it's already bring a lot of benefit. But we, as Pa Alexius also already mentioned, we need to build more trust, because without trust, then this economic interdependence would still be very fragile and very vulnerable, and cannot really bring optimal benefit to both sides,
to both parties.
Both parties.
And trust is also fragile. I mean, it takes a lot to build it up, and then a sensitive matter comes.
That's right.
And then now it's, well, it is a very sensitive matter.
That's right, Luisa. And let's go back to Jakarta Convention Center, the JCC now, where we are looking at the arrival of heads of delegates and the rest of the delegations from the Republic of Korea. We believe that the 24th ASEAN and ROK, or the Republic of Korea, is commencing very, very soon. And there you have it, the head of delegates of South Korea is welcomed in person with warm greetings by the President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, Luisa. And the backdrop, if you would notice, is actually the illustrations of the IKN, the so-called, the new capital of Indonesia, Nusantara, the giant screen,
City.
Nusantara City, the capital city, where we expect in 2024, we'll move there. Jakarta will become just the big city, the New York of Indonesia, if you would say it. And now signing the guest book, always with the traditions of arrival of heads of state or heads of governments to Indonesia. I'd like to get your take on this, Professor Alexius Jemadu. Right. How do you describe international relations of ASEAN and ROK now that we have reached the 24th summit?
Yeah, it is mainly about economy.
Okay.
And I believe that
not just culture, pop and music and drama.
To say the tales on that. But you see that right from the beginning, the theme that Indonesia has chosen for the summit is ASEAN matters, epicentrum of growth. So there is a strong intentionality to give emphasis on the economy. And the same thing with the Republic of Korea. You know, they have invested a lot of money here. And they are very good also at technology, green energy, things that are needed by Indonesia and the rest of ASEAN. So you see that South Korea, Republic of Korea, also gives great importance for its relations with ASEAN. They say it goes south, because they look at the market here. Almost 700 million people. This is a great market for technology, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong, Pa Jose. South Korea is a country which relies much on international trade and investment. And that is what they want to make sure that all those investment goes smoothly, and with, of course, investment returns for them. And they understand that ASEAN countries need all those capital, technology, green energy, and Republic Korea is very
They're
good
flourishing.
at those things.
They're flourishing.
Yeah,
I mean, like
that's
if
true.
you think like 10 years, 20 years back,
That's
we
true.
don't really think of Republic of Korea going far ahead than us.
That's true.
But at the moment, they're ahead of pretty much a lot of sectors.
That's
I mean,
true.
not just economy, but also,
Yeah.
as you mentioned just now, pop and culture. And they're really at the center of the world's attention at the moment.
Yeah, and to add to what you said, Louisa, we share almost the same age. South Korea earned their independence just 2 days before us, on the 15th of August 1945. But they have gone
so far
30, 40 years ahead of us in terms of technological advancement and world domination, if I may say.
Through K-pop.
Exactly.
I think Pa Jose will talk much about this, but my observation is that South Korea is one of a good example. Countries with not much natural resources, but then managed to go to a higher level as part of these developed countries, member of OECD, Pa Jose.
There's pressures of revenge to Japan.
They work very hard. They know where their weaknesses are, and they try to do the best in technology, human resources, international trade, and that's why they managed to go to the higher level as newly industrialized countries.
They're just starting,
long time
right?
ago already. And now they are on the same level and capable of challenging domination of the West. So this is a good example for Indonesia and the rest of ASEAN. If South Korea can do that, I think we can also do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yes, if we have good...
Doesn't hurt to dream, right, Professor?
Of course, you need to dream first.
We need to dream. It motivates us.
That's our dream. At least
exactly.
in 2045, Indonesia negara maju, developed
golden
That's
Indonesia,
the goal.
2045, as was said by.
But exactly, I mean, like Professor Jamadu, like what can we learn from South Korea? What is it that we're missing out, that we're not going at that accelerated rate at the moment?
Too many things.
Too many things.
First of all, we need to be aware of our weaknesses.
Not our strengths, but our weaknesses.
But also our
first.
strengths. But first of all, you have to know where you are weak. For instance, our human resources, our mastery of technology. Those are the things where we are weak, and we learn so much from South Korea in order to accelerate. Not business as usual. You have to do things in a more extraordinary way to improve the quality of education. To embark on how your universities work together with industries in order to learn about this new technology for supporting your industrial development.
Right.
Mr. Yose seems to be nodding a lot in agreement.
Well, I believe Indonesia and also ASEAN can learn a lot from South Korea. Although actually the new administration still expected to come up with new strategy toward ASEAN, because this is still relatively new, only 1 year in the power, and unlike the previous administrations of South Korea that came up with a strong and explicit new Southern policy that look to the South, especially ASEAN, to cooperate, to have greater cooperations. The current administration, in my opinion, remain to be ambiguous toward ASEAN. We still expecting something concrete from South Korea, or at least the strategy and the approach that we can come up with a stronger cooperations at the moment.
What do you, in your perspective, what should we expect from the 24th summits of ASEAN ROK here in Jakarta?
Yeah, hopefully that can lead to concrete cooperations, such as Korea might be also interested in setting up the supply chains of the many green technology, green products, such as electric vehicle, for example.
Yeah.
It can be done, but mostly at the business level. If the government can also facilitate that kind of cooperations, it's not only that each country bilaterally in ASEAN has this kind of cooperation, but rather ASEAN as a whole can also develop the supply chains together with Korea.
Right. As far as we're concerned, ASEAN plus 3, something that we heard a lot throughout the deliberations here, is that we have ASEAN plus the 3 partners, China, South Korea, and Japan. And for the first part of the day today for the summits, each of these nations have their separate meetings with ASEAN.
Right.
How would you compare separate meetings of each of these entities as opposed to them coming together as 3 dialogue partners to ASEAN, Mr. Yose?
Well, ASEAN plus 3 has been very significant in ASEAN initiative, in many ASEAN initiatives actually. Like for example, ASEAN already has the Chiang Mai Initiative.
Chiang Mai Initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. It was set up by the ASEAN plus 3.
What does it entail, Mr. Yose?
It provides the social, it provides financial safety net. Is there any?
Yeah, I'm going to have to pause you there. Apologies, Mr. Yose, as we go right ahead to Jakarta Convention Center for the opening remarks of President Joko Widodo for the 24th ASEAN and Korea Summit. Let's have a listen. Well, we hope to bring up the audio very soon from Jakarta Convention Center, where we believe we are just minutes away from the opening of the 24th ASEAN ROK Summit. Do please continue, Mr. Yose. I know you are in the middle of conveying your points there.
Oh, yeah. About the ASEAN plus 3, it has been playing critical role because by combining the 3, meaning 9 or 13, 13 economies, 13 countries, then it provide very big resources that we can utilize in this region. ASEAN plus 3 has been crucial in providing financial safety net by having this Chiang Mai initiative. This is kind of like the IMF of the region. So when the
money reserve, you're saying?
That's right. When the economy in these regions collapse or go south, then they can go
to the cushion for us.
Yeah,
they fall back on.
That's right. That's right. And also ASEAN. I think this is also one of the agenda in economic agenda in ASEAN is to strengthen the ASEAN food reserve. And the ASEAN plus 3 food reserve is the strongest one. I think one of the strongest in the world for a rice reserve. And then currently ASEAN together with the 3 partners would like to strengthen, would like to even put more resources into this rice reserve.
Now that you mentioned about food security, what kind of action should ASEAN take, Mr. Yose?
Yes, it's not only limited to ASEAN, but I think ASEAN can also continue the current programs with ASEAN plus 3. ASEAN already has this ASEAN plus 3 rice reserve, but it can be extended not only to rice, but also to other main commodities, other food commodities, for example. But this is only good for a kind of like emergency case.
Yeah.
When we're talking about food security, we also need to deal with the rice market.
Right.
The rice, especially international rice market. What happens to India, for example, when India announced the ban for rice export, the price of rice increased a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the agreement took place in Xiamen, Thailand, which is one of the biggest rice exporters in the region. I mean, we even at some point imported our, staple from Thailand. So that's a good sign for the region, if I may say.
Yeah.
Right. I'd like to go over again to Professor Alexius Jimadu. Professor, one of the notable sessions yesterday at the first day of the summit was the ARP Forum, which is the ASEAN and Indo-Pacific Forum. Yeah. And this has also been one of the, if I may say, hotly contested regions by the two biggest economic powers in the world. The US comes with its Indo-Pacific strategies, and then we have China on the other sides with Belt and Road initiatives, and we have our very own ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. So how do we strategically position ourselves in the midst of these two big powers?
Yeah, we want to send the message to these great powers that we are here in this region, Southeast Asia, and ASEAN should play a central role, centrality of ASEAN, because we need this regional stability, and we want to make sure that ASEAN countries will not become the victims of this military rivalry. That's why they come up with this idea, ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which is essentially about the inclusivity, and the way we use peaceful means, dialogue, openness, respect for international law. Those are the standard things, the norms that we want to tell the great powers that we want to play by all these international rules.
We're not taking sides, you're saying.
Regulation. And knowing that we can only ensure the stability of the region if we all respect international law, rules-based international regime, in this region.
All right. Let's go over again to Jakarta Convention Center now, where the opening remarks were President Joko Widodo of Indonesia to open the 24th ASEAN and Republic of Korea Summit.
Yang Mulia,
His Excellency
Presiden Yoon Suk Yeol,
President Yoon Suk Yeol,
Sri Baginda,
His Majesty,
Yang Mulia para pemimpin ASEAN,
ASEAN leaders.
Selamat datang di Jakarta,
Welcome
Presiden
to
Yoon.
Jakarta, President Yoon.
Bagi Indonesia, kemitraan
For
ASEAN,
Indonesia, the ASEAN Korea partnership
adalah
is
partnership
the partnership of the future.
Dengan pilar utama
With the main pillars
transisi energi dan
of energy transition
transformasi digital.
and digital transformation.
Ketergantungan ASEAN terhadap
ASEAN's dependency
78%
on
sumber
78%
energi fosil harus
fuels
dikurangi.
must be reduced.
Di saat yang sama
At the
dalam
same
satu
time,
dekade ke
in one
depan,
decade,
ekonomi digital di
digital
ASEAN
economy in
diperkirakan menyumbang
ASEAN is predicted to
1 triliun
contribute $1 trillion
GDP
to
kawasan.
the regional GDP.
Namun transisi energi
However,
dan
energy
transformasi
transition and
digital
digital transformation
butuh investasi dan
require
transfer teknologi yang
investments and
tidak
transfer of
sedikit,
technology at a
sehingga
significant
dibutuhkan
amount.
kolaborasi dan
Therefore,
kemitraan untuk
collaboration and
mewujudkannya.
partnership is needed to materialize
Yang Mulia,
it.
selain dari sisi ekonomi,
in addition
kemitraan
to an
masa depan
economic standpoint,
hanya
our
akan
future
bisa
partnership
dicapai
can only be achieved
jika
if
stabilitas kawasan
regional
dijaga,
stability is maintained,
jika
if
tensi dan rivalitas
tensions and
diturunkan,
rivalries are reduced,
jika
if
strategic trust dipertebal,
is
dan
deepened,
jika
and
habit
if
of
the habit
cooperation
of cooperation
ditingkatkan.
is intensified.
Ini merupakan tanggung jawab
This
kita
is
semua
shared
yang berada di
responsibility
kawasan
for those in the
Indo-Pasifik, dan
Indo-Pacific,
saya
and
mengapresiasi
I
dukungan
appreciate the
Korea
support of Korea
terhadap
to the
ASEAN
ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum.
Ini adalah wujud
This
nyata
shows a
kerjasama
real
inklusif untuk menjaga
cooperation to
stabilitas dan
maintain
kesejahteraan di
stability and
kawasan
prosperity
Indo-Pasifik.
in the Indo-Pacific.
Demikian dari saya,
That is all for me.
dan dengan ini
I
saya
hereby
nyatakan
declare
KTT
the
ke-24
24th ASEAN and Republic
Republik
of
Korea
Korea Summit
dibuka.
officially opened.
Selanjutnya saya
Next,
mengundang Yang
I
Mulia
wish to invite His Excellency
Yoon Suk Yeol, Presiden Republik Korea,
President of the
untuk
Republic of Korea,
menyampaikan
to deliver
pembukaannya. Yang
his opening
Mulia, saya
remarks. Your
persilakan.
Excellency, the floor is yours.
조코위 대통령님, 그리고 판민칭
President Joko
ASEAN
Widodo,
각국
Prime Minister
정상회의.
Pham Minh-ching, and
이번
distinguished
아세안
leaders from ASEAN nations.
정상회의를 잘 준비해
Allow me to
주시고
express my sincerest
따뜻하게
gratitude
환대해
to
주신
President Joko
조코위
Widodo
대통령님께
for
감사드립니다.
graciously hosting the ASEAN-related summits
한
and
아세안 대화
extending a warm
조정국으로서
welcome to us.
각별한
I would
기여를
also like to
해주신
extend my special
베트남의
thanks
판민칭
to Prime Minister
총리님께도
Pham
감사의
Minh-ching
말씀을
for his outstanding contributions
아세안
from
정상
Vietnam
여러분,
as the country coordinator.
지난해
Esteemed leaders of
이
ASEAN,
회의에서
at
저는
last year's meeting, I
한
unveiled
아세안
the
연대
Korea
구상을
ASEAN
말씀드린
Solidarity
바
Initiative,
있습니다.
also known as CASI
이러한
for
한
short.
아세안 연대 구상은
This initiative is
아세안
founded upon
중심성과
the Republic of
인도
Korea's
태평양에
unwavering
대한
support
아세안의
for ASEAN
관점에
centrality
대한
and the ASEAN
대한민국의
outlook on
확고한
the
지지를
Indo-Pacific,
근간으로
or
합니다.
AOIP.
지난 1년간 한
I am
아세안
extremely
연대
proud that
구상이
over the last year,
8개의
the Korea
중점
ASEAN
과제를
Solidarity Initiative,
식별하고
CASI, has
협력의
identified and
외연을
advanced
확장해온 것을
8 key
기쁘게
areas
생각합니다.
of focus, expanding the breadth and
그동안
depth of our
저는
cooperation.
한미일 협력을
And in the
강화하는
meantime,
노력을
I continue to
지속적으로
focus on strengthening
기울여왔습니다.
trilateral
지난
cooperation among
8월
the Republic
캠프
of
데이비드
Korea, the
정상회의를
United States,
계기로
and Japan. In
한미일
August, the
협력의
trilateral
새로운
summit at Camp
시대가
David
열렸습니다.
opened up a new chapter for cooperation
한미일
between the 3
3국은
countries.
아세안이
Underpinned
주도하는
by the 3 countries'
지역
full
구조에
support
대한
for the ASEAN-led regional
전적인 지지를
architecture,
바탕으로
the ROK, US,
각국의
and
인태
Japan have
전략을
committed to
조율하고
coordinating our
신규 협력
Indo-Pacific
분야를
strategies and
발굴해
exploring new
나아가기로
areas of
했습니다.
cooperation.
이를 위해
To this end,
연례
we have
한미일
initiated
인도
the
태평양
annual
대화를
trilateral
발족하고
Indo-Pacific dialogue
아세안과
and
태평양
launched the
도서국의
trilateral maritime
해양
security
안보 역량을
cooperation
지원하는
framework, aiming
한미일
to support the
해양
maritime
안보
security
협력
capabilities of
프레임워크를
Southeast Asian
새롭게
and Pacific Island
출범시켰습니다.
nations.
정상 여러분,
ASEAN leaders,
한국은
Korea
전쟁의
rose
폐허를
from the
딛고
ashes
일어나
of war
불과
and has
반세기 만에
become one of the leading countries in the
선진국으로
world in
도약한
just half
나라입니다.
a century. And
대한민국은
we hope to share
2030년
this exceptional
부산 세계
experience with the
박람회를
ASEAN
통해
countries and
우리의
beyond
발전
by
경험을
hosting the 2030
아세안을
World
포함한
Expo in
많은
Busan,
해양국가,
Korea.
많은 이웃 나라들과 공유하고자 합니다. 또한 인류가 직면한
We
도전
also
과제에
want to
대한
provide a platform
해결책을 함께
where we can
모색하는
join our heads together
플랫폼을
and explore
제공하고자
solutions to the
합니다.
challenges facing
부산은
mankind.
2014년과
Busan has a track
2019년 두
record of
차례에
having
걸쳐
successfully hosted
한
the
아세안
ASEAN-Korea
특별 정상회의를
commemorative summits
개최한
twice
곳이기도
in
합니다.
2014 and
이 자리에 계신
2019. And I would
아세안
assume that many of your
정상님들께도
excellencies here today
친숙한 도시일
already find
것이라고
Busan quite
생각합니다.
familiar.
부산이 다시 한번
I ask for your
인태
support
지역과
to Korea's
전 세계
endeavor in that
인류의
regard,
더
so that
나은
Busan can
미래를
once
만들어
again
나가는데
contribute to building a
기여할
better
수
future in
있도록
the Indo-Pacific
여러분의
region and for the
관심과
entire
지지를
humanity.
부탁드립니다. 한
Let
아세안의
us move
공동
forward
번영을
together
향해
towards a shared
함께
prosperity between
나아갑시다.
ASEAN and
감사합니다.
Korea. Thank you very much.
Terima kasih Yang Mulia. Selanjutnya
Thank you, Your
sebelum
Excellency.
mulai sesi pleno
Before we proceed
yang akan
to the
dilakukan secara
plenary session,
tertutup dengan hormat
which
saya
will be
mohon
conducted in a
awak
closed session,
media untuk
I
meninggalkan
kindly
ruang
request
pertemuan.
members
Terima
of the
kasih.
press to exit the meeting room. Thank you.
You're back watching from the 43rd ASEAN Summit Special Dialogue here at TVRI World, and we are still with Mr. Jose Rizal Damuri from the CSIS, as well as Professor Alexius Jemadu from University of Pelita Harapan, Jakarta.
Right.
Thank you so much, and we'll continue with our dialogue. Just now we have heard once again that President Jokowi said that South Korea is really forefront in terms of digital economy. And President Jokowi also mentioned that he's looking forward to having more collaboration with Indonesia. What kind of collaboration can we expect?
Yeah, there are many, of course, collaboration that has been going on at the moment, or can be expanded in the future as well. One of the things that has been mentioned on the digital economy, I think Korea and ASEAN, as well as with Indonesia, has a lot in common. with the digital economy. Korea perhaps has embraced the digital technology a little bit further with compared to ASEAN, but the state of the digital economy developments in those two regions, I think are a bit the same. And then we can collaborate with each other, cooperate with each other to come up with a better regulatory framework, as we discussed before, the better governance on how to tap into the benefits of digital technology, and also to respond to the new technological progress, the one that will shape our future, like artificial intelligence, for examples, or machine learning, or many other type of technology that would require new approach and new governance. There are also several other areas of cooperation, such as the developments of sustainable products, for example, and sustainable technology. Sustainability becomes a new important element that everybody needs to jump in and also need to support, for sure. And I guess I have to admit that the regions, the Southeast Asian region, as well as Northeast Asia, is still like a bit behind when it comes to the sustainability aspect. Sustainability agenda. If you look at the report from the UN, for example, on the state of these regions, we still have a lot of homework in trying to reach our target on dealing with climate change, on dealing with the sustainable development. And I believe South Korea, including also our partners in this region, such as China and Japan, they have good resources in order to push even further, to accelerate this kind of agenda, sustainability agenda in ASEAN as well.
Well, Mr. Yose, just now you mentioned digital economy as well as sustainability, and that is actually 2 out of the 3 priority issues in the economic sector. Right. The other one being recovery and rebuilding. Yeah. How are we in this sector? As I mentioned, we are a bit behind, maybe because the awareness is also still not up to our expectations. We also still need to deal with the technology. Somehow the technology that has been implemented in other regions, such as in Europe, for example, or North America, might not be suitable for our regions. Because, like, for example, several technologies, such as the solar panel technology, might be modified a little bit to cater for our geographical characteristic. That's why.
Right. If I may pause you there for a moment there, Mr. Yosef, we do have pictures now from the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum, where we believe, that's a statement on behalf of Australia. Let's have a listen in.
$95.4 million to support 3 initiatives that go to the heart of the strategy's priorities. We'll form new deal teams based in Southeast Asia and drawing on public and private sector expertise to identify opportunities for Australian investors and support projects through to finalisation. These teams will develop a pipeline of investment-ready projects and advise Australian investors on matters from regulatory approvals to finding local commercial partners. We'll also embark on a new Southeast Asia Business Exchange program to boost two-way trade. This will improve awareness of trade opportunities both in Australia and in Southeast Asia. And we'll set up an exchange program for young professionals, building enduring links between Australian and Southeast Asian businesses. This will see talented young people from Australia gain experience working in Southeast Asian companies, as well as Southeast Asian professionals gaining experience in Australian businesses. I look forward to getting these up and running. Deepening our engagement with Southeast Asia is an absolute priority for Australia and for my government. But as I've said today, it's also an opportunity for the whole region. In the years ahead, all of us will benefit from the security we build together, the prosperity we create together, the stability that we preserve together, the sovereignty we respect together, the environmental commitments we fulfil together, the energy transition we drive together. We can make Australia's, ASEAN's next half-century even more successful than the last. And we can share in that success, ASEAN and Australia, together. I thank you very much for your attention today.
Thank you very much. The Honourable Anthony Albanese MP, Prime Minister of Australia.
All right, great words there from Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, just further cementing, solidifying cooperation between Australia and ASEAN. And has been mentioned yesterday on day one of the ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum by our very own Minister of State-owned enterprises, Eric Thohir. He mentioned that this is a platform for both the private and state enterprises to work together. So how potential is it, in your perspective, for ASEAN to take part in the Indo-Pacific economic affairs, Professor?
Yes, this is the uniqueness of ASEAN positions, to provide a platform where all these countries can see that they have common interests, commonality of interest for stability, for security, for economic interdependence is very important. And that is why we value the presence and the role of ASEAN in providing a platform where all this great power, despite of their diversity of strategic interests, but then yet they can sit together to talk about what they can do together in order to ensure these common interests that they have. And this is very important if you want your economic programs to run smoothly. You have to be on the same page about the importance of security, importance of respecting one another's sovereignty. We want to make sure, and I think that is what Prime Minister Albanese has emphasized in his speech.
The key word security was actually mentioned by Prime Minister. Do you think, in a way, he refers to the instability and escalating tensions at the South China Sea? As as we know, it is one of the most potential trading routes for Australia, China, and ASEAN member states. Maybe Mr. Yossi can add on this.
Well, but before that, I might also...
what do you make of the speech?
Say something about the Indo-Pacific as well.
Please do.
I think when we call Indo-Pacific, normally in the past what we have in mind is competition and rivalry. Because this is a strategy from the major powers, normally from the US, that introduce some kind of, the response to the current situations. But I think ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific changed the narrative. Nowadays, we do have when we call Indo-Pacific, we also think about cooperation. And I believe that also comes from the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. So this is why for ASEAN it's pretty much very important to proceed to support or to go forward with this outlook on Indo-Pacific. Unfortunately, I didn't see. Perhaps Pa Alexius also can jump into that these discussions. I did not see any progress so far. What we have these 2 days is a forum on Indo-Pacific. I don't know whether it is a good response to that kind of situations that is arising at the moment. I think we have to go far beyond just having a forum on Indo-Pacific, but rather to have some kind of framework on Indo-Pacific, because there are many other parties also have this Indo-Pacific strategy, and they already come up with the guidelines on that. Yeah.
We'll go back to the venue of the day 2 of Indo-Pacific Forum, where we have the Vice Minister Pahala Nugraha making a statement. Let's have a listen.
Other green molecules such as green hydrogen. By 2023, Indonesia has already developed B35, replacing about 35% of our diesel oil with FAME. And Pertamina has also launched recently Green Pertamax, which is comprised of gasoline as well as bioethanol, and targeting to be able to achieve E20 before 2030. Third, we are also launching and building our electric mobility and EV ecosystem in Indonesia. With about 26% of the world's resources in nickel, Indonesia has the ambitious plan to make batteries with a capacity of more than 140 gigawatt-hour in the year of 2030. Other ASEAN member states also have great potentials, such as the Philippines, which are actually also has a very significant potential in developing nickel. In Indonesia, we also have more resources than just nickel. And third, we are also trying to actually build also our capability and also our capacity in the area of not only biofuel, but we are also building our ability to be able to connect the green industry cluster. As you know, all of the ASEAN right now, we all have the ambition to be able to become part of the global supply chain in the EV ecosystem and also beyond. And therefore, to be able to develop a much more cohesive EV ecosystem, we need to also be able to connect our green industry cluster through what we call the green ASEAN grid. And that is also one of the key outcomes of today's ASEAN summit, is that how are we going to be able to connect the ASEAN member states through what we call the ASEAN grid. And I think one of the key potential things that we are going to be able to realize by connecting all of the ASEAN member states through ASEAN grid is that we are going to be able to develop a much more cohesive ecosystem in building the future supply chain for the world, including that in battery. Lastly, the development of the EV ecosystem as well as the manufacturing capacity will not be able to be realized without the connectivity amongst the ASEAN member states. And therefore, building green ports and storage for the green molecules, such as green hydrogens and sustainable aviation fuel, is one of the key elements of how are we going to be able to develop a much more cohesive ecosystem and much more regionalized supply chain in being able to develop this EV ecosystem. So some of the examples that we are actually seeing right now, for example, that there is an emerging hydrogen market that will be created of about 1.4 trillion market by the year of 2050. And therefore, Indonesia right now is pushing for this initiative. Indonesia is still at the very nascent state of green hydrogen development. Regarding the SAF, Pertamina has also been developing as a sustainable aviation fuel through many of the initiatives that we have. I think that's all that I can brief you on this green infrastructure. we hope that we'll actually give you some ideas about the topic that we will discuss in the following panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bapak Pahala Nugraha Mansuri.
So there we just heard a remark from Pahala Mansuri, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that's pretty much speaking about green economy, something that we're just tapping into.
Yeah.
How is Indonesia at the moment compared to other ASEAN countries, Mr. Yose?
Well, the whole region actually, as I might say again, a bit lag behind, in this green transitions. For example, if we need to look at these green transitions, we have to develop first energy transition, and energy transition is a little bit. It's very difficult to do in these regions, in ASEAN, because we don't really have the technology and we don't really have the financing also. And another thing is also because many countries in ASEAN, including also Indonesia, do not really have a market structures that is supportive toward green energy transition. Like for example, in several ASEAN countries, we still have big energy subsidy. Especially fuel subsidy, and fuel subsidy, of course, discourage people to go for green energy, to go for renewable energy. We also, in many ASEAN countries, the electricity sector remain to be quite restrictive and quite monopolistic, while on the other hand, when we need to go to the renewable energy, we need to go for electrification. So the electricity sector need to do some kind of reform as well.
I mean, it's a little bit ironic thinking that the nickel actually comes from Indonesia. We have the resources, yet we're not up to date compared to the other countries.
Yeah, we haven't built the battery factory yet.
Well, battery actually just one element, small elements on these transitions. This green transition cannot be reduced only for producing EV, for example, or producing battery. It's a very complex, very complex framework, very comprehensive framework that account for the energy transitions, industrial transitions, behavioral transition as well, and many other transitions. So I believe that these regions need to need to have more comprehensive perspective on this green transition. Otherwise, we're going to be to be behind. And it's not only about the climate itself, but it also brings a lot of economic consequences in the future if we fail to do that now.
To adapt it to Indonesia.
Right. Great points there, Mr. Yose. I do, however, have some burning questions in my mind I'd like to ask you, but we'll have to go back to JCC now. We have our colleague Shafira Junia standing by at the Jakarta Convention Center with the latest developments on the ground. Shafira, today a lot of meetings, a lot of summits with the ASEAN counterparts are taking place. What more can you tell us about the ongoing summits over at the Jakarta Convention Center? Shafira, your report.
That has just begun and is ongoing right now, and followed with the 26th ASEAN-Japan Summit and also 26th ASEAN +3 Summit that is expected to strengthen collaboration not only in the region but also globally. And the first day of the ASEAN Summit concluded with the retreat session yesterday that resulted a couple of agreements, one of which is that the 5-point consensus, or 5PC, will still be a reliable sources and principle to solve the conflict that is happening in Myanmar, and also the implementation of the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific that will be strengthened, and all parties agree that the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific will be a great collaborations that need to be strengthened in the future. And later on the second day, today, the second day of the 43rd ASEAN Summit 2023, there will be ASEAN-US Summit, and there also will be ASEAN-China Summit that is scheduled to take place, followed by the gala dinner at 7 p.m. tonight at Hutan Kota Gelora Bung Karno. And that President Joko Widodo will be hosting the gala dinner at the Hutan Kota Gelora Bung Karno. And that's what we have for now.
All right, Shafira Junior, they're reporting live from Jakarta Convention Center. We thank you very much, Shafira, and apologies for the technical difficulties there. We hope we have better connections and can hear you better from the studio here. However, in the meantime, Shafira, thank you for the reports, and we'll look forward to hearing more from you on the latest updates from JCC. Thank you again. Let's return to Mr. Jose. I had to delay my question there because it was on just to echo what my partner has said, because there has been this global outcry to shut down coal power plants around the world, including Indonesia, where it is one of the most reliable power sources for our country. Is it even realistic for us to be able to close a number of percentage of our coal power plants and just replace it with something greener and better alternatives? In your opinion,
that's one big questions or even dilemma, perhaps for a country like Indonesia and many other developing countries that still rely on coal. In Indonesia, for example, more than 65% of the electricity still come from coal, and then if we imagine if we turn off all of them, then it would also have very big impact to the economy. So what we can do is just to make this kind of transitions going on, and we need to have. I also mentioned that we need financing in order to do this kind of transition, and this financing is currently not really available. That's why this kind of financing should also be borne not only by the countries itself, but
not domestically, but also from international sources.
From international support, from the international sources, both from private sector and also from the public sector. That's why ASEAN also need to promote the cooperations in this kind of green transition, especially energy transition, because it requires a lot of financing. Some even estimate that the energy transition requires around $2 trillion to $4 trillion US dollar every year globally, and it would be very difficult to do for the developing countries to do that. Including also many ASEAN countries here in Indonesia. So this really needs a lot of cooperations, not only among ASEAN countries but also with many other people. And the most developed countries need to realize as well that this kind of target, this kind of actions need their support fully.
I agree with what Mr. Jose has to say, because having to have that goal of achieving a sustainable economy, a green economy, sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot of financing and security that has to be implemented right there. What do you think the government can do? What strategies can the government implement to make going green, achieving that green economy easier for the people of Indonesia?
First, of course, I think we need to have greater awareness, especially from the people itself. With greater awareness, it is easier for this economy to make transitions toward green, because people would also can chip in to the process. Otherwise, they still want to have the fuel subsidy in place, which is really not supportive toward the transition. And the second one, also I think for Indonesia and other ASEAN countries, against what I mentioned previously about cooperations need to be promoted. Indonesia already has what is called Just Energy Transition Partnership with the G7 countries, where the G7 countries provide $20 billion. But this is just a starting point, a starter, because it requires a lot more for this kind of financing. I think this year Vietnam would also join JETP with the G7, and this is a good thing for ASEAN countries, so that ASEAN countries can go hand in hand to demand more support from G7 or from developed countries.
We still need funding for this transition.
Exactly.
I mean, if we talk about electric vehicles, I also want to have an electric vehicle, but I mean, it has to make sense in terms of pricing and also infrastructure.
We go over to Jakarta Convention Center again. We're a parallel meeting of the Indo-Pacific Forums, and we have Japan taking the podium now.
50周年、そして日インドネシア外交関係樹立65周年の記念すべき年に日本の総理大臣としてインドネシアを訪問し、この ASEAN インド太平洋フォーラムにおいてお話しできますことを大変光栄に思っております。インドネシアをはじめとする ASEAN 諸国の飛躍的な経済発展に後押しされ、インド太平洋地域は世界経済を力強く牽引をしています。インドネシアが本年の ASEAN 議長国として成長の中心 Epicentrum of Growth をテーマに掲げたこと、これはまさに時機を得たものだと思います。また今回のフォーラムにおいて日本から多くの協力プロジェクトが紹介される、このことを大変誇らしく思います。ASEAN の掲げるインド太平洋に関する ASEAN アウトルック AOIP と日本が進める自由で開かれたインド太平洋 FOIP は開放性、透明性、あるいは包摂性、国際法の尊重といった本質的な原則を共有しています。ASEAN の中心性、一体性を一貫して支持してきた日本は、2019年にいち早くこの AOIP への全面的な支持を表明いたしました。そして本日、ここに私は、日 ASEAN 包括的連結性イニシアティブを発表し、日本として6つの分野で連結性強化の協力を進めていく旨宣言をいたします。6つの分野とは具体的に次の通りです。第一に 交通インフラの整備です。港湾、道路、鉄道、空港を整備をし、ASEAN 諸国の人の流れ、物の流れを促進していく。我が国が現在実施しているプロジェクトは約2兆8000億円分にまで拡大をしています。ハード面での協力に加え、技術面によるソフト面での協力を行い、日本の技術や知識を継続的に提供してまいります。第2に、デジタルコネクティビリティです。日本は ASEAN 各国のさらなるデジタル化、デジタル化、そしてデジタル技術を用いた地域の連結性強化に協力していくとともに、サイバー空間の安全を守ることに貢献をしていきます。第3に、海洋協力です。海でつながった日本と ASEAN 諸国の連結性を強化する上で重要な要素です。我が国は海上保安機関や海上警察への研修の実施、巡視船の供与などを通じて海上法執行能力の強化を支援していきます。第4はサプライチェーンの強靭化です。新型コロナのパンデミックやロシアのウクライナ侵略を受け、物資の安定的な流通の確保や食料安全保障が重要な課題となっています。我が国は ASEAN 地域のサプライチェーン強靭化に貢献し、ともに危機に強い経済、これを築いていきます。第5に、電力の連結性です。急速な経済発展を遂げている ASEAN 地域では、電力需要も増大しています。安定的な電力供給を確保するため、我が国はマスタープランの策定や研修などを通じて、電力の連結性向上を支援していきます。そして最後に、人、地の連結性です。社会の発展を支えているのは人であり、人が持つ知です。我々は幅広い分野の人材交流や研修事業などを通じて、ASEAN 諸国の人材を育成するとともに、日本と ASEAN 諸国の人々のネットワーク、これを強化していきます。日本はこれらの分野において、今後3年間で5000人の人材育成を行います。ASEAN 諸国と技術協力を進め、ネットワークを強化することで、我が国も ASEAN とともに成長していく。日本と ASEAN が新たな社会的価値を共有できる未来を築いていきたいと思います。本年12月、日本 ASEAN 友好協力50周年の締めくくりに、ASEAN 諸国の首脳を東京にお招きをし、日 ASEAN 特別首脳会議を開催いたします。そしてその場で将来の日 ASEAN 関係と協力の大きな方向性を示すビジョンを共同で打ち出したいと考えています。政治、安全保障、経済、文化、社会の各分野にわたる幅広い協力のイニシアティブを打ち出すとともに、魅力ある文化、人的、知的交流や日本語教育支援の取り組み、これをさらに推進してまいります。こうした取り組みを通じて、日本と ASEAN の輝ける友情を次世代につなぎ、新たな時代を我々の輝ける機会とすべく、皆さんと共に前進して まいりましょう。照り任しありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, His Excellency Kishida Fumio, Prime Minister of Japan.
There we have the Prime Minister of Japan speaking, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Now, if we can go to Professor Jamadu, we mentioned about some sensitive related issue just now about the South China Sea. And of course, there's another matter that is pretty sensitive, which is the Fukushima treated water release issue. Do you think, Professor, that the ASEAN Summit will discuss this topic at all? Or do you think they will also refuse to talk about this topic instead?
Yeah, ASEAN has the tradition, has the habit of avoiding sensitive issues. Yeah,
these leaders can pivot very well, right?
Especially here, Indonesia as a host will be very, careful in navigating this summit to make sure that everybody feels comfortable with that.
It's a very Asian thing.
Unless they go out the door and meet the members of journalists. That'll be the first question they ask.
They really want to make sure that all these economic deliverables, will go smoothly, so that the president can tell the Indonesian people, look, we are successful with this, and there is a lot of benefit that we can gain from this summit. So yes, there is a problem of environment, but I don't think that they are going to explicitly, mention that and to raise the issue during this summit. But one important thing about Japan is that Japan is unique, because it's a part of traditional ally of United States in Asia. But yet, at the same time, Japan also has a deep economic engagement, Pak Yose, with ASEAN and also with Indonesia, even before China has done. Between Japan and China, I think there is a competition, how to get benefit out of this big market of ASEAN and big market of Indonesia. So what does that mean for us? We need to be very creative in using the opportunities offered by Japan and China in order to accelerate our economic development, with all this industrial downstreaming by the president, and with all the EV ecosystem. We need to really use the opportunities given by all these three partners in Northeast Asia, Korea, Japan, and China. They come here, they offer opportunities for us, but then at the end of the day, it is up to each ASEAN members to utilize those opportunities for the benefit of their own people.
Okay, nicely said right there.
Mr. Yosef, from your overall analysis, how would you describe the current state of relations between ASEAN and Japan? We know that the hottest issue at the moment was mentioned by my colleague is the treated Fukushima water, which the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida himself has refuted by eating the raw sashimi deriving from the treated water. Share with us your thought.
Well, in general, I think Japan remains to be the most, you can say, favorite partners to ASEAN.
Why is that? Enlighten us.
Because every year there is this kind of survey trying to capture the perspective of ASEAN,
like satisfactory level or something.
And Japan always be number one partners in this survey. And then and it also goes in many various areas. Either it is in economy, of course, in the economic area, the cooperations between ASEAN and Japan is really still very strong. But not only on that economic area, we also see that in security, military, although it is only limited to joint training, for example, but it is still quite strong, and in cultural and social cultural as well. So I believe the current issue with the Fukushima waste is not really going to disrupt or to disrupt the relations between ASEAN and Japan. It's not going to be a big issue. And then, of course, Japan also need to be more sensitive toward that kind of issue. Try to also accommodate, to be accommodative toward the ASEAN's perspective as well.
All right. So before we close our show today, let's go to Professor Jamadu. Following this 43rd ASEAN Summit, what result can we expect?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the emphasis is on the economy. But let us make sure that the summit will come up with two things. First of all, the process of economic recovery will go smoothly. But then in order to be able to do that, we also hope that this dialogue with the partners will also ensure our common security, regional stability, respect for one another's sovereignty, and that will create our region a stable one with sustainable economic growth.
Right. And lastly, from you, before we close the program, Mr. Yose, can we truly hope to achieve resolutions to all of these pertinent matters to ASEAN? The three biggest hammers, Myanmar's issues, South China Sea, and addressing geopolitical tensions and rivalries. Will we see light at the end of the tunnel after the summit?
Well, I agree with Pa Alexius that there are very important issues that I don't think ASEAN can afford to swipe out under the carpet anymore. because we need to deal with those issues more explicitly, more comprehensively at the moment. And then although perhaps we don't really see in the joint statement or in the outcomes of ASEAN, hopefully the spirit to solve those issues remain to be there and can be maintained, can proceed as well in the next agenda of the next agenda of ASEAN.
By of course maintaining the relationship and trust between all these countries.
Right.
Well, that is all the time that we have for this first part of our coverage for the 43rd ASEAN Summit and its associated summits here in Jakarta. I'd like to express my gratitude to our guest today, Professor of International Politics at University of Pelita Harapan, Professor Alexius Jamadu. Thank you very much. And also the Executive Director of CSIS, Mr. Yose Rizal Damuri. Thank you both very much for your insights and your time here on TVRI World.
Thank you.
Luisa, we do have more upcoming agendas for the summit today. Just after the Japan that will be taking the arena of summit after South Korea today, we'll be witnessing ASEAN +3, as you mentioned, Mr. Yose, and also ASEAN, the anticipated one, ASEAN plus US with VP Kamala Harris, and at the end of the day, ASEAN plus Canada, where President Justin Trudeau, who is currently single, will be taking the podium as well. In the meantime, we bid you adieu. I'm Rahmat Idris.
I'm Luisa Kusnandar. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to TVRI World for more updates. Thank you and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.